Mr. Yang, you could have already stayed on stage because this is what we are continuing about. Not only the topic of 5G, but also more the infrastructure that comes with it, the technology and the development that's provided, but also the next panel is going to reflect some other aspects, as for example, what's the significance of this interconnectivity and what's the impact on our society? And our first panel is going to reflect on several of these aspects, and I kindly ask to welcome on stage Andreas Birwirth, CEO Magenta Telekom, Philipp Rösler, former Vice Chancellor, Federal Republic Germany, and Minister of Economics. Please have a seat, get cozy and comfy. Mr. Chaobin Yang, President of the 5G product line, and our moderator, Martin Kotinek, Editor-in-Chief from Der Standard. Welcome on stage.
Thank you. We've just heard a lot about 5G, and with the start of the first nationwide 5G network in South Korea earlier this year, it's not only a buzzword anymore, it's becoming a reality. So let's talk about the opportunities that are fueled by 5G and about the changes our societies will be faced with. How can mankind make use of autonomous technologies, for example, and other applications? And also, what is the responsibility of change makers like the people in the room in our societies? Let's talk to the experts. We've just heard a lot about 5G from Chaobin Yang from Huawei. Andreas Birwirth is the CEO of Magenta Telekom here in Austria. Philipp Rösler, the former Vice Chancellor of Germany and the CEO of the Hainan Zihang Charity Foundation. And I'm Martin Kotinek, the Editor-in-Chief of the Austrian news organization, The Standard. You just said something about, so you said 4G has changed people's lives. 5G will change societies. What are the three most revolutionary applications that will change societies?
So anyway, I think when each generation of the new mobile technology comes, so we will always face the same question. So what is the killer application of these new technologies? So today, I think if we look at the network capabilities, if from the network point of view, I think it's quite simple. For 5G, it just provides a much faster speed and a much lower latency, and it can also support more connections in the mobile network. So this is the network capability of the 5G. But based upon such kind of capabilities of the network, so it will bring changes to the people's life, and also it will bring changes to the society. Mm-hmm. So today, I think two key use cases, it has already come to true. The first one is fixed wireless access. Today, with the 5G, it is possible to provide the gigabit access to the home market. Mm-hmm. So it can help to solve the difficulties of deployment of the fiber. So which will be used in most of the countries. So it will be definitely come to true. Then the second one, if we look at the use case in South Korea, we believe that virtual reality will be one of the killer applications in the consumer market. So today, I think 1/3 of the subscribers in South Korea, they are using the virtual reality, and the people are willing to pay for that. I have been in South Korea to experience the virtual reality with the smartphone. The user experience is quite good. Then the third one is digital transformation for the other industry. Mm-hmm. I think in these areas, we still need to be jointly investigated. But anyway, I think for some of the applications, I really do believe that it will come to true. Mm-hmm. If in such kind of use case, it needs the high speed of the data transmitted from the different things to the cloud. For example, if we can have some, if the cloud should have some capabilities of the visual capabilities. Then 5G can give great help. Today, if we look at the artificial intelligence, most of the artificial intelligence should be based upon the video. So we do believe that with the capabilities of 5G, so the artificial intelligence will become quite common, so which helps the digital transformation.
So it's virtual reality on the smartphone, it's artificial intelligence. And Andreas, what does life with all these technologies, when you have it on your smartphone, what does it mean?
For us, good morning, first of all. We are now starting, or we have started 5G, by the way, as the first company in Europe a couple of months ago in Austria. And to be very honest, the translation into what's in for the customer, that will take some time. First, it is super fast internet, and I think especially for Austria, there are 2 or 3 perspectives. The first one is rural areas. In Austria, we have a tremendous problem that the country is super beautiful, but we have a lot of mountains, we have a lot of valleys, and the structure out of Vienna is a lot of small cities. And it is very cost expensive to roll out fiber in small cities with 200, 300, 1,000 inhabitants. And for this reason, Austria is, I would say, a not well-developed country in terms of high-speed internet access. And 5G then produces the first business case that we can start to roll out, you can say, speeds with more than 100 megabit, I would say, based on 5G countrywide. So Austria gets to be connected everywhere. And I think that is the first important message with 5G. And the second one is 5G offers a super tremendous capacity also in urban areas. And if you look, for example, TV, watching TV, OTT, if you have a better connectivity, you will start to change your behavior. And we already see that younger generations where they have internet, they don't watch TV in the classical linear way. They go on OTT stuff and they need high-speed internet access. The second part, also to dream for you a little bit, is autonomous driving, and not the case that the car needs the information. There are also informations like accidents, etc., transported via 5G to the car. But what is the driver doing when he's not driving? And for us, the major use case in the 5G spectrum auction was the data volume to be transported into the car for the driver when he's not driving, because he's looking at Netflix, Amazon Prime, or some other stuff in the car, and these data, these videos, they have to be transported. And these are, for example, some use cases. Maybe a last one is, of course, IoT. So the real-time transportation of data is, of course, enabling use cases like in the healthcare, where really you need a real-time, you can say, things. In the traffic management, all the cases where in the past we said the latency is too small, now with 5G, we can enable that.
So even in rural areas, we'll be driven by autonomous cars and watching Netflix on our cell phones while we do that. That's kind of the future that's coming with 5G.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So 5G, and even for our rollout strategy, we will start to roll out 5G, especially in the rural areas. So normally 4G, by the way, was rolled out from urban cities into the rural areas. 5G is a better mix. It will start in the rural areas to go into the urban areas. Because in the urban areas, we also have fiber to the home and other stuff, and we do not need the capacity so urgently like we need it in rural areas. That's also an interesting perspective on 5G.
And it's not only for the consumers, it's also for businesses. Do you see any new applications coming up there?
And of course, I think the first thing is that in 5G, there's a new technical element in which we never had before. We can slice a part of the network out, so it's a little bit like cutting the network into 2 parts and giving a specific part to a customer. And for example, I make an example from my past, Austrian Airlines maintenance. If they want to have, you can say, a specific environment to make their informations about maintenance of aircrafts, they can get it, and nobody is allowed to enter and get the sensible data. And also mention, I believe, the virtual reality stuff. I see it pretty much happening in Asia. If you go to Korea, that's a part of the culture to be fancy ahead. I don't see it happen so quickly in Europe. But where I see it is in the B2B field. Because if you see, and I make the same example, if you make aircraft maintenance and you go to an engine of an aircraft, for the engineer, it's very good if he has glasses to see the manuals, where he has to screw, etc. But of course, it must work. If the information is coming, you can say, doctor, doctor, doc. The use case is not working at all. And of course, in a hangar, if you take the same example, it's easy. You can make WLAN, Wi-Fi in the hangar. But if the aircraft is outside, somewhere in Linz and not in Vienna, you don't have WLAN. And you need to have 5G to get the information to the maintenance engineer. And I think this virtual reality really drives, for example, parts like predictive maintenance, like maintenance issues, together with the VR pretty much ahead.
So engineers that use glasses with data connection for maintaining airplanes, these are completely new job profiles as well. Philip, is there any, how will job profiles change with 5G?
First of all, we have heard from both of my colleagues here on the panel that 5G is a fascinating, fancy new platform. But at the same time, they will even speed up the change in economics, of course, but also in society. And the link between both means for the question of jobs. And so I think no one knows that much, but my real profession is I'm a trained medical doctor. So even this will change, right? We just spoke about virtual reality. You can even have some remote operations and so forth. And there's a totally different style. And honestly, there's always a question if you even need human beings. Maybe as a doctor, still a long time, but the machine could be even today way better than you. Because you have always to ask if the patient is coming to you. So first to make an anamnesis, to ask him, so what is your life? And what have you done? What have you eaten? And so how was your night? And sometimes you will forget something. The machine won't forget anything. So they're even today better. Or if you have a specific therapy, they will make it for you, way better without any mistake in this case. So that will change. And once they will discuss a sort of replacement. And so we have to change in our one life, working life, maybe 3 or 4 times. And back in times you learned one job, you stayed in this job, for the rest of your life, and now you have to change. And that is a nice, interesting, fancy stuff, but at the same time, it could be threatening to the people, because changes is not always welcomed and not always liked.
Which job profiles do you see as the most ones that will be changed the most?
And a good question, because if I understand 5G correctly, that means we are coming closer and closer to the real Internet of Things, which means everything which can be digitalized will be digitalized. And that means almost all the jobs will be digitalized to some extent. And there's always the question if it's only an add-on or will it be once a replacement. But I cannot imagine one job where you are free from any digital impact or influence. Even politicians need sometimes digital fancy stuff.
And there might be differences in regions as well. For example, the US might be completely different than Asia or Europe. Do you see any differences in these regions and how they react to these changes that are coming up?
Yeah, I know. So you have the pioneer mindset and spirit in the US, of course, which means, so in Europe, Germany, Austria, we say, look, everything which is not specifically explicit allowed is automatically forbidden, right? Whereas in the US, everything which is not explicit forbidden, hey, let's try it. This is a pioneer mindset, which is more in the US, not that much in Europe, and I'm not that sure in Asia. But they have other advantages. For example, they're early adopter. They are interested, curious, and they want to change it out. They are techies. And so there's, from the very early beginning, a market, fast growing. So it's interesting to put the products into this kind of markets. You can build up, you can use 5G way faster than the European guys can do it, because we're a little bit, we're very thoughtful and always having more the risk in mind rather than the opportunities. And that's not super helpful if speed is becoming more and more decisive.
What about Asia?
Yeah, anyway, I think today, for 5G, 3 regions, I think the progress is much faster than the rest of the world. The first one, South Korea, China, and also the Gulf countries in Middle East. We noticed that in these three regions, the operator have already started a massive deployment of 5G network, and they act very fast, and the subscriber development is much fast than the rest of the world. And in Europe, I think there are still some challenges. Today, I think the first challenge, I think the spectrum is much more fragmented. Yeah. Europe is go for the right direction. Yeah. Have already started to allocate 3.5, 3.7 to 5G. But anyway, I think because there are lots of the legacy system, so which lead to the fragmentation of the spectrum in some of the countries in Europe. Yeah. But anyway, I think since this year, we also noticed that lots of the countries in Europe have already issued the 5G license. I do believe that since next year, the 5G deployment and the applications of the 5G in Europe will be accelerated. Then I think for the United States, I think it's quite a challenge for them. Because in the past 3 years, the United States mainly focused on the millimeter wave. So the year before, I think Verizon spent billions of the US dollar acquired some of the millimeter wave spectrum. But unfortunately, I think because it is so high frequency band, it's quite difficult for Verizon, for the operator in the United States to deploy the network. So though I think President Trump have pushed a lot to FCC to release the spectrum from 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz to the mobile industry to 5G. But anyway, I think today the progress is quite slow. Yeah. So I think that in the United States there will be lots of the challenges.
You said there's some latency in the system in Europe. Do you experience that? How is it?
I'm pretty much touched by, if you look back to the early years, 50s and 60s, the total wealth of the European economy is, you can say, built up by industries like automotive industry. And why? We've been ahead in Europe in building up good streets. We had, you can say, car manufacturers here. We had the customers who were buying cars, and the whole spiral went up. And this easy example, you can also take to digital industry. Because where it happens, where the demand is there, the companies are there to develop it further, and you can say the wealth out of this industry will be settled. And what I observe now, Europe against US and against China, that in the US you have a lot of, like Philip said, entrepreneurship, and the companies are going ahead. But in China, it's not the entrepreneurship itself, it's a master plan. And it is starting, you can say, with connectivity. If you only take a city like Shenzhen in China, and you can confirm, there are 40,000 5G sites ready at the end of this year. That is more than in Europe together. And secondly, if you look, for example, customer data protection, we in Europe, we are very sensible, for good reasons, about how we treat our customer data. In China, you are following a little bit different model, but of course, then you can start to work with customer data in the good manner, maybe in a more discussed way, but in the end, the industries like Tencent, Alibaba, and co. will be years ahead in terms of managing data. How can we do if we cannot scale it up? And especially in Europe, where we have, you can say, plenty of languages, where the borders and regulations are starting to stop outside Austria and even not being harmonized in Europe. I think for us, when we see this, I get very concerned that as we do not understand what is happening in the major part of the society, a big opportunity of the wealth of my kids is disappearing, and you can say being sorted out to other regions of the world, and we might be the third world in 70, 80 years from now, because we just have not seen it, or we didn't want it. And the discussion about ethical values, for example, what is the better thing, having the wealth in 70 years versus keeping our ethical values up, or how can we combine it? This is not taking place in the same speed as we have to do it. And maybe we are set in 70 years. What has happened in our generation?
So there are different values in different regions. There are the entrepreneurs in the US. There is the master plan in Asia, as you called it. And in Europe, where we have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is, of course, a good thing, but there might be some challenges. So what can we do in Europe that we keep up with this change? Maybe Philip.
First, we should be more self-confident in this respect, because you just mentioned the GDPR and other nice things, and that's true. So the mindset is here a bit more, privacy, data protection is an issue, of course. Therefore, we have now legal consequences. And funny enough, if you look now to the US, you will see that they try to adopt to the European idea, GDPR, certainly because of the market, but that means to some extent the European market is important, even for the dukes, for the big companies in the US. So this is, I think, a good learning. If you look now to the US, they're all in the different states, and they are not even half as good as the GDPR, honestly. So I think that means you have a market power to some extent, and that we should use it first. Second, US, as well as China with Shenzhen and others, they're very strong in software. Honestly, way better than we, because they understood in the times of the 4G and 3G maybe, that to be very successful business entrepreneur in the digital world, you need a table, broadband connectivity, bandwidth, and a good idea, and then you can be as successful as the guys in Europe or US. Today, and that's the good news, therefore we should be more self-confident, if we talk about Internet of Things, now to all the ordinary production stuff, the digitalization is coming. We are not that good in software as the others around the world, across the world, but we are very good in the classical engineering, machines, and so on. And if we bring now the technology, the digitalization to this kind of industry, the classical industry, then I think we can be very successful and better than many other regions, because it's easier to build software out from the scratch rather than a strong, solid, and sound industry.
Mm-hmm. And for our societies, for the changing job profiles, what can we do there to prepare for this?
First, always remain optimistic and not too pessimistic. Yes, the jobs will change. And difference to the last decades, not only the low-level paid jobs, but also high-level paid jobs. So, and that will go immediately into the mindset of the middle class, which is always the strongest pillar in any society. And that will deteriorate to some extent the trust that all this new fancy stuff is good for the society and good for yourself and your family. So we have to address it from the very early beginning. And even jobs will change. I would put a bet on this table. We have now 2019, so maybe in 10 years, that we at the end will have not less jobs, what many very negative people predict, but even the same level or even more jobs. I cannot always say what kind of jobs, but I'm still optimistic that people, creative, innovative enough to find their way and to create some jobs. And you just spoke about planes, it's both of our passions. And back in times, they started to travel to the US with ships. I've seen in the news, okay, maybe that's coming back again, but then we had all these ships and these companies, and then the plane came up 120 years ago, and now we have an entire-industry around planes. So why don't we have maybe once an entire-industry around a robota or whatever? Mm-hmm. So I would be always remain optimistic.
So Philip put a bet on the table. We will have more jobs in 10 years due to 5G. What do you think? Will he be right?
I agree with Philip. I think the tremendous chance we have is to win the game in IoT. Because we have the big, you can say, the classical companies who are manufacturing, you can say, the big machines for laser industries like Trumpf or Carmen industry, etc. So starting there means if they are able to digitalize their industries, they stay ahead. If not, then we really have a problem. So the second race, after we lost a little bit the consumer race, and the Amazons and WhatsApps and Alibabas, they are a little bit away. I think the race in IoT, it's not we can win, and I think we must win, otherwise we really have a big problem. And I'm optimistic what I see, that we at least can win this game from the understanding of the companies and the management of companies. I think that has arrived. And I'm a little bit optimistic in terms of learning. There are a lot of discussions about younger people having to learn Mint and software, etc. The good thing is, if I look to my kids, even the youngest one with 5 and 7 years, they understand an iPhone and Huawei phone by themselves. They just grow up with it, and being in touch with software is a little bit normal for them, and even more normal than in my generation. But nevertheless, the transformation of jobs to train people to get connected to software, I think is an issue we have to tackle. But also this I'm optimistic we can tackle in the end.
They were in the middle of the responsibilities for change makers in the room, but also policy makers and others. What do we have to take into account when 5G comes and we all build appliances and other stuff? What should we look after?
Anyway, I think when 5G comes, because 5G is not only connect the people, but will also connect different industry. So 5G can provide the capability to connect those that are unconnected. So which means, but such a kind of new technologies, which will bring both opportunity and challenges for all of us. So regarding the connectivity for the different kind of industry, we think that the first one, I think, is business model needed to be redefined. Because today, I think the business model is not so clear. If there is not so clear business model, it will be quite difficult for the application of the 5G to be developed. Then the second one, I think, that is for the policy make. Yeah. For example, just now, I think we have mentioned about the autonomous driving car. Yeah, for the autonomous driving car, I think it is more challenges in the law make than that in the technology. Yeah. And for the autonomous driving car, I do believe that it shouldn't 100% rely on the network. The car itself should have the capability of autonomous driving. But with the network, it can work much better. But despite whether it depended on the network or not, it will bring challenges for the lawmaker.
An interesting part what I see like today, the fascination of 5G, but a new phenomenon which is coming up, and I've never experienced before, is you can say the feeling of the danger of 5G. And that is very strange. A lot of people are now coming and saying, I fear for 5G, radiation. We see even on social media stuff like birds are falling down next to 5G antennas and stuff like this, so really fake news. And for us to make this transparency, what does it really mean, 5G, is a new topic we really have to tackle and we have to educate. And if you've seen a little bit technical slide, maybe for most of you, don't know if you have understood it regarding spectrum, where the new spectrum will be located. For us, this was very important slide because you could see that 5G will be transported on more or less classical spectrums, which are not as more dangerous as the light over there. You would never come to the idea and sit next to that light 1 centimeter away, you know, that's burning. But nobody of us is sitting here and feeling that he might be, from the health status, be endangered because the light is on. And that is very similar to 5G. It's the same, by the way, like 4G. It's the same spectrum. We just transform the technique, so nothing is changing, only with the very right-hand side, with the micromillimeters. And I think that stage was so early that even you didn't mention it, maybe 10, 15 years. So this transparency about 5G is for the good, and not that we start. And last example for me, and I think it's good to transfer to Philip. In Belgium, the whole government has decided not to roll out 5G due to the feeling of health. And they are very proud, the minister over there, and saying we protected our population against 5G. And if we come to such populistic decision in the environment of digitalization, it's getting dangerous a little bit, I would say.
In which country was it?
That was Belgium.
Okay.
As a country.
So as a former politician and policymaker, what do you think, Philip, are the responsibilities of the change makers?
Tricky question. So first, there's the three-step idea, so that you say, look, if a new technology comes up, first the people will adopt and will take and use this new technology. Then the economy is following as a second part, as a second step. They will produce products and services around this new technology. And the third step, the slowest today at least, these are the policymakers, politicians, as well as regulators, right? And coming back again to the question of 5G, which means speed is decisive. We have to say that not the big fish is the smaller ones, but the faster, the slower. So then we have to speed up this process. And that does not mean simple, hey, let's make faster new regulations. That's not my approach, as you can imagine, still liberal. But what we should do is the cooperation between these three pillars, if not even say silos, to break down and to have a better cooperation, to explain to the policymakers more about the technology so that they really can understand what they're talking about and what they will regulate. And the same is, we need the people to understand the trend, which kind of these specific technology will you use, be it virtual reality, be it, communication, whatever. So I think this is the main point, that the challenges which might be ahead cannot be solved in the classical way of coping and solving these kind of issues. You need a better, you say, multi-stakeholder agreement where everyone is coming together, addressing the new technologies and trying to find solutions for maybe some upcoming challenges.
Do you see
Simple
that
forbidding is the most stupid ones, allow me this to mention, in today's times.
Do you see that happening somewhere? Is there a use case already?
So first, the World Economic Forum, I'm not working anymore, but yeah, so they try to make these multi-stakeholder theory to bring to life, bring in policymakers, politicians, business leaders, civil society, the next generation, the youth, media, and then they discuss the new way of coping, whatever, with these new technologies. So there are some role models, and I think societies, again, the freer the better, so they are creative, innovative, and they will find this kind of solution. But someone has to nudge them, so to use this word, that is really needed, and it's time to start this kind of new process now.
In your speech, you said that with 5G, change is coming even faster. So this is Austria, and there is a culture sometimes there where change is kind of a threat. It's a culture where sometimes you can hear, haben wir nicht, brauchen wir nicht, haben wir nicht, wollen wir nicht. So this is kind of, nothing should change. Let's keep it as it is. It's good already, so why change it? And when I hear that every 20 years there will be a new job, you have to be retrained, and these self-driving cars will disrupt our whole system of driving, and what can Austria do to actually profit from these changes with our culture? What can we do?
Yeah, but anyways, any new technology come to life, it can bring both opportunities and challenges. So I think it quite dependent on how we to use this kind of technologies. For when new technology comes, definitely I think, it will replace some kind of job, but it will also generate the new job opportunities for the other people. For example, in China, I think when 4G started to deploy in China, so lots of the people started to buy goods online. So lots of the shop have been closed. Lots of the people lose their job. But alternatively, I think we generated more than 3 million delivermen. Yeah, we have found the new job opportunities. So when 5G comes, it will also bring such a kind of new opportunities and also new challenges.
So your advice to Austrians, see the opportunities. Okay. What's your advice?
I think the same. We must develop the opportunities, I think, and there are so many, like health status, like all the examples you have mentioned. And I think we should focus on that and develop them and make a more open discussion on the ethical part and our values, to sacrifice a little bit on the discussion there to take the opportunities on the other side, I would say. But I'm optimistic that we go this way.
Okay, and your advice?
And at least we built it out, the 5G, so hopefully that's happening and the customers will take it.
Your advice for Austrian culture?
You mean so for a former German politician to be in Vienna? But yeah, I would say again, remain, stay optimistic, be self-aware, and therefore self-confident. Look, if it's true that speed is more relevant than size, because size doesn't matter anymore in times of the fourth industrial revolution, I would say that not that big country like Austria has all opportunities to change the entire economic system, society system based on people's ideas, way faster than a country with 80 million or even 1.2 billion people can change and fast. So I think you have lots of opportunities. You have a strong industry. You have not only small and medium-sized enterprises, but I would say Mittelstand. And I think putting this all together, you have a lot of opportunities. So this could be also an Austrian thinking.
Mm-hmm. Quite an optimistic view. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your insights and thanks for your attention.
Dann machen wir mal schnell von den Jungs hier ein Selfie. Guck mal hier.
Thank you very much for this very insightful talk. Thank you very much.